In January 2007, a man walked onto a stage in San Francisco and killed BlackBerry. He didn't know it yet. Neither did BlackBerry. But the moment Steve Jobs held up the first iPhone and said, "Today we are introducing a revolutionary mobile phone," the clock started ticking on one of the most dominant tech companies the world had ever seen. At its peak, BlackBerry wasn't just a phone. It was a status symbol, a power tool, a badge of importance. Presidents used it. CEOs swore by it. Lawyers, bankers, surgeons. If you had a BlackBerry, it meant you mattered. By 2009, the company behind it, Research in Motion, controlled nearly 50% of the entire smartphone market in the United States. Half of everything. And then, in less than 5 years, it was gone. Not slowly fading. Not gracefully stepping aside. Gone. Collapsed. Humiliated in a way that still baffles business schools today. How does a company that dominant, that deeply embedded in the lives of the most powerful people on the planet, simply disintegrate? The answer is not what you think. This is not a story about a company that made bad products. BlackBerry made extraordinary products. This is a story about what happens when success becomes the most dangerous thing a company can possess. This is the story of how BlackBerry conquered the world and then destroyed itself. To understand what BlackBerry lost, you first have to understand what it built. It is 1999. The internet is exploding. Laptops are everywhere. But mobile communication is still primitive. Your phone can call people. Maybe send a clunky text message if you're patient enough to tap the same button 4 times just to get the letter S. Email exists, but it lives on your desktop computer. When you leave the office, you are unreachable. That is the world Mike Lazaridis saw his opportunity in. Lazaridis was a Canadian engineer, a man obsessed with wireless technology long before most people understood what wireless meant. In 1984, he founded Research in Motion in Waterloo, Ontario, with a simple belief that data could travel through the air the same way voice did. That the office didn't have to be a place you went. It could be a device you carried. In 1999, RIM launched the BlackBerry 850. It wasn't a phone. It was a two-way pager that could send and receive email wirelessly. In real time. Instantly. This sounds ordinary today. In 1999, it was nothing short of miraculous. Corporate America lost its mind. Within months, Wall Street traders, investment bankers, and government officials became completely addicted. The device earned a nickname almost immediately, Crackberry. Because that is exactly what it felt like. A hit of information delivered to your hip at all hours wherever you were. The compulsion was immediate and total. By 2003, RIM had evolved the BlackBerry into a full smartphone with a keyboard, a phone, a calendar, and push email that arrived before you even asked for it. The physical keyboard, those tiny raised buttons that your thumbs learned to navigate with frightening speed, became the defining feature of an entire era. Research in Motion's co-CEOs, Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie, were celebrated everywhere. Magazine covers, keynote stages. They were the men who had put a computer in the pocket of the most important people in the world and made them dependent on it. In 2009, BlackBerry's market capitalization hit $83 billion. $83 billion. For a company from Waterloo, Ontario. That made little keyboards. And then Steve Jobs walked onto that stage. When the iPhone was announced in January 2007, the reaction inside Research in Motion was not panic. It was something far more dangerous. It was dismissal. Mike Lazaridis reportedly looked at the iPhone and saw a flawed product. And technically, in some ways, he was right. The first iPhone had no third-party apps. It had no copy and paste. It had no MMS. Its battery life was mediocre. And critically, it had no physical keyboard. For a man who had built his entire empire on the premise that serious professionals needed real keys to type on, a glass touchscreen felt like a toy. Balsillie was equally unconvinced. He is reported to have said, after seeing the iPhone announcement, that it was not a threat to their core business customers. That enterprise clients, governments, banks, hospitals, law firms, would never abandon BlackBerry's legendary security and email reliability for a consumer gadget with a glass screen. This was not stupidity. This was a documented psychological phenomenon that Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen had already written about nearly a decade earlier in his landmark work, The Innovator's Dilemma. Christensen's research showed that dominant companies almost always fail not because they stop innovating, but because they keep innovating for their existing customers in the direction their existing success points them. They listen too well to the people already paying them and go deaf to everyone else. BlackBerry's existing customers loved the keyboard. So BlackBerry kept perfecting the keyboard. BlackBerry's enterprise clients needed security above all else. So BlackBerry kept hardening its security infrastructure. Every rational business decision pointed in the same direction. Deeper, not different. Meanwhile, Apple was doing something BlackBerry had never had to consider. Apple was seducing the consumer, not the CEO, not the government official. The regular person, the student, the curious teenager, the person who wanted to browse the internet on their phone just to see what it felt like. And here is where the trap closed. Because those teenagers grew up. Those curious consumers became the next generation of professionals. And when they entered the workforce, they brought their iPhones with them. They pushed back against IT departments. They demanded their employers support the device they already loved. And slowly, then all at once, the enterprise wall that BlackBerry had built its entire business behind began to crack. Before I continue, if you want to understand how quickly a market can shift from one technology to another once a tipping point is crossed, subscribe to Behind the Tech. We go deep on the stories behind every major tech disruption, every single week. Haven't said that, let's dive back in. RIM's internal response to the iPhone threat was chaotic. Engineers were tasked with building a touchscreen competitor. Projects started and stalled. Deadlines were missed. The culture that had made BlackBerry so precise and reliable, deeply hierarchical, engineering-led, obsessed with hardware efficiency, became a straitjacket when speed and software creativity were suddenly what the market demanded. The BlackBerry Storm launched in 2008. It was RIM's touchscreen answer to the iPhone. It was a disaster. Reviewers called it buggy, slow, and unintuitive. The screen used a click mechanism. You physically press the glass down to register a tap, because Lazarus still couldn't fully commit to a pure touchscreen. It felt like a compromise. Because it was. Meanwhile, Apple launched the App Store in July 2008. Overnight, the iPhone stopped being a phone and became a platform. Developers flooded in. Games, productivity tools, social media, banking apps, navigation. The iPhone became a device that could do almost anything. BlackBerry's app ecosystem, by comparison, was a ghost town. By 2010, Android had arrived at scale, squeezing BlackBerry from a second direction. Now, RIM was fighting a two-front war with a product roadmap that kept falling behind. Then came the outage. In October 2011, BlackBerry's messaging service collapsed globally. For 4 days, millions of users around the world, in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, could not send messages, access email, or browse the internet on their devices. 4 days. For a company whose entire brand promise was reliability and security, it was catastrophic. Not just as a technical failure, as a symbol. The Columbia Business School researcher Rita McGrath, who studies competitive advantage, has written extensively about what she calls the transient advantage, the idea that in fast-moving markets, competitive advantages don't last, they expire. And when they expire, companies that built their entire identity around a single advantage collapse fastest of all. BlackBerry had built its identity around 3 things: the keyboard, the security, and the reliability of its messaging network. By 2011, the keyboard was seen as outdated. The security advantage was eroding as Apple and Google hardened their own platforms. And then the network went down for 4 days. All 3 pillars. Gone. The market reacted with devastating speed. Enterprise clients who had quietly been managing a wave of employee iPhone requests suddenly had no reason left to hold the line. The bring-your-own-device revolution, which IT departments had been resisting for years, flooded through every corporate firewall at once. In January 2012, BlackBerry held 51% of the Canadian smartphone market. By the end of 2013, that number had fallen to 4%. Not a decline, a freefall. Lazaridis and Balsillie resigned in January 2012. A new CEO, Thorsten Heinz, came in and launched the BlackBerry 10 operating system, a genuinely impressive piece of software that arrived approximately 3 years too late to matter. In 2013, the company announced a loss of nearly $1 billion in a single quarter. By 2016, BlackBerry announced it would stop making its own phones entirely. The company did not disappear. It pivoted to software and security, licensing its brand name to other manufacturers and selling cybersecurity services to governments and corporations. But as a force in the device market, as the company that had once made the most important object in the pockets of the most powerful people on Earth, it was over. And here is the thing that should keep you up at night. BlackBerry did not fail because it ran out of money. It did not fail because its engineers were incompetent. It did not fail because it stopped caring. It failed because it was too good at being exactly what it already was. It optimized so completely for the world that existed that it had no capacity left to imagine the world that was coming. It listened so intently to the customers it had that it went completely deaf to the customers it didn't have yet. And in the time it spent defending what it built, the ground beneath it shifted entirely. That is not a BlackBerry story. That is a human story. It plays out in companies, in careers, in industries, in governments, every single day. The most dangerous moment is not when you are struggling. It is when you are winning. Because winning hardens you. It tells you that what you are doing is correct. And in a world that moves as fast as this one, correct today is obsolete tomorrow. Right now, in a boardroom somewhere, a team of very smart people is looking at a very successful product and deciding there is no reason to change it. They are looking at their numbers, their market share, their loyal customers. They are doing exactly what Lazaridis and Balsillie did in January 2007. And somewhere else in a smaller room, someone is building the thing that will make them irrelevant. But BlackBerry's collapse did not happen in a vacuum. It cleared the path for a smartphone duopoly that reshaped the entire technology industry in ways that are still unfolding today. Click on this video right here to find out how Nokia went from ruling the world to nearly disappearing, and discover the real reason Nokia collapsed. I'll see you there.